My name is Naeem, and in this video we will go through my 5 steps when evaluating offers from technology startups. I'm assuming you're a software developer or software engineer and are interested in this topic. Um, Also keeping in mind that I'm also assuming that you are a bit of a risk taker, that you want to do something interesting, something cool. Regular 9 to 5 is not going to cut it for you. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just you want to do something cool and startup in the software world. Okay, so the question is, how do you go about evaluating offers from startups, right? So we live in a time when there are plenty of software companies out there that are startups, early stage, and they're always looking for engineers. So you probably get approached a fair number of times from company A, company B saying, hey, would you work for us? So how do you look at those offers and evaluate them? Well, this video will step us through essentially the 5 steps, my 5 steps that I go through when evaluating offers from a startup, or that I used to do. So I'm kind of far along in my career now, but this is what I used to do, and it's still relevant today, I feel. Anyways, before we even get to that, just a little bit of homework in terms of setting your own expectations and taking responsibility for doing your own homework. Okay, so let's step back a moment. What are your expectations? I mean, if you think you are going to join a startup and just hit it big and you're going to walk away with mega millions, it's probably not going to happen. Just up front. Okay, so keep those expectations a little less lofty. The most likely outcome is that A, the software company will go belly up in a couple of years, run out of money, and B, you will walk away with some truly amazing experience that you can then roll into something more meaningful or more with a higher chance of success. That's the most likely outcome. So make sure your expectations are, that's the base level, and then we can go from there and kind of maximize our impact, because a less likely outcome than the one we just talked about is that the company will succeed up to a point and you will walk away with some money. I mean, it won't be, I'm going to retire money, but it'll be a decent chunk of change. And of course, you will have that experience we talked about. That is also a higher chance of happening than just, the mega million situation. So keep that in mind. So if you still have this itch that you want to do something cool, you want to work with a software company, get lots of good experience, and have a chance of making some good money and a very small chance of making a lot of money, how do you maximize this chance? How do you look at those 5, 6 different offers that you have, that you're looking at, that you're exploring, and pick the one that gives you the best chance of success? All right. Do your homework. Right? So the first thing you need to understand is that you have to take responsibility for your own success. Do a lot of due diligence. You will need to read a lot of documents, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of Googling, do a little bit of looking up in the market, at what market the software company that you're approached by is in, and kind of be prepared to do that. The amount of effort you put in is what will maximize your chance of success, right? You have to be picky. Don't accept the first offer that comes along. You are interviewing the company as much as it is interviewing you. Go in with the mindset of an investor, because when you join a startup, you're probably giving up some amount of your market salary, and you're probably picking up some options or some stocks, some equity. Well, you're basically an investor, and you have to think like one. So if you're investing money, you need to make sure that the ROI is going to be there for you, right? So that was kind of the preamble. Now let's move on to the 5 steps. So step 1. Evaluate the management. So when a software company approaches you and says startup approaches you and you're taking a look at it, the first thing you want to do is take a look at the senior management of the company, okay? And you want to do your due diligence on those people. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you want to do is ask them for a PPM. So any company, any startup that starts up has something called a private placement memorandum or something similar. This is a document that companies use to put in front of investors, of potential investors, and investors read them. The document contains stuff like the company's business plan, the market they plan to be in, the amount of money they're looking for, the bios of the founders are in there. So that's generally like a packet, an investment packet. And sometimes called a PPM, a private placement memorandum, sometimes called something else. Ask for that. Okay? There's no reason why you can't have that. There's no reason why you can't read through it. So when you go take that and when you read that, it gives you a pretty good idea of what the company is about and answers a lot of questions that you might have but might be too shy to ask. Okay, so don't be shy. Go ahead, get the PPM and read through it, or investment documents and read through it. Take a look at the CEO, right? Has he or she done a successful startup before? If yes, that's definitely a couple of solid points in the company's favor. This is somebody who has done this job before and has been good at it, demonstrably so. Okay, great. Even if they have done a failed startup before, that's still a point in their favor. They know the score. They've been around the block. If it's a founder that has never done anything before, if it's a CEO that has never really run a company before, never done a startup before, that's a little bit of a red flag for me. Probably not something that I would seriously consider unless there's something else that changes my mind. Oh, one thing which I also forgot to mention, in the PPM, in the investment documents, if the company doesn't have them, that means to me that they're probably really early stage and not something that I'm that interested in. Too much of a risk for me. Your mileage may vary. For me, if the company doesn't have investment documents created, then that's probably not mature enough of a startup for me to join, right? So just keep that in mind. So anyways, back to management. One thing that you also want to be sure of is the management has not been involved in lawsuits, or if they have been, then they have been resolved in the past and to your management's in your management's favor, right? So if the CEO has been sued by the investors before, or if there's current lawsuits pending, that's a red flag. And that's obviously easy to find in this day and age. You just go to Google, your state will have something like a CaseNet site or something that you can just type in their name and see what lawsuits they've been involved in. Very easy to do. Do that. That'll inform you a little bit again. Another aspect for you to take a look at when you're evaluating the management, right? Use LinkedIn to find some common contacts with the senior management of the company. There's a good chance of that happening, right? I mean, reasonably connected, people are reasonably connected. If you find somebody who is one or twice removed from the senior management of the company you're considering, give that common contact a call. Ask them what they think, right? So get some feedback, get some blind reference on the management that you're considering joining. Spend some time chatting with the CEO, right? Ask them to spell out the risks and rewards of joining that company and the risks and rewards of the market that the company is in. And then you're not looking for the right answer. What you're looking for is how the CEO handles the question, right? So if you get a lot of dissembling, if you get a lot of hums and ahs and not really a straight answer, that should give you an answer. If you get crisp, clear answers, a clear articulation of the risks as well of the space, somebody who doesn't sugarcoat it, but somebody who is kind of what you're looking for is somebody who believes in what they're doing, but who is not blind to the risks, right? Somebody who is whom you think you can trust. So that's what you're trying to evaluate when you talk to the CEO or the senior management in general. Look at the commitment level. Like I've seen startups before where the CEO is a part-time guy, where they're doing something else by day and they're trying to start up a company by night. Doesn't work for me, right? You need 100% commitment for a startup to be successful. You cannot half-time it. You cannot half-ass it. So that's a hard pass for me if I see a part-time CEO. Another red flag event for you. See if you can figure out if the CEO's friends or family have invested in the company in a bootstrap round. Because if they have, that tells you something, that the CEO of this company that you're considering joining does have the trust of his friends and family. If they don't, if there's nobody from their family, nobody from their friends who has invested, that also tells you something that you probably want to. It's a red flag for me, right? So that's step one, evaluating the management. If you do all of these different sub-steps, you should have a pretty good idea of whether this management is good, if it's solid, if it has other people who kind of say they're good, and who are reasonably clear-eyed about what they're doing. Step two is evaluating the funding to make sure that the company is reasonably secure financially in the short term and in the medium term, right? So every company that starts up goes through many rounds of fundings, right? So they'll do a seed round, they might do a bootstrap round where the founders put in their own money. They might have a friends and family round, and eventually the professionalism of the rounds evolves as professional money people get involved, like VCs and private equity firms, and then you start to move into Series A, Series B, these kind of funding rounds. So find out where in the spectrum of funding the company that you're talking to is in, right? So if they are bootstrapped, probably too early. This is really another one of those companies that doesn't have a PPM put together, doesn't know where they're going to be getting next funding from. So bootstrap is probably too early for me. Series A might be a little bit early-ish as well. On the flip side, if you see a company that's in that Series D or Series E, that means it might be a forever startup. That means, they're pretty much always raising money and getting bigger and bigger, maybe, but they're never quite turning the corner. For me, neither one of those outliers work. So I'm looking for some company that is far enough along in the funding spectrum that in the funding line, that I know that they are real, they're legit, they have raised a decent amount of money, and they have a lot of headroom, a lot of room to grow. Right? They're not continually going back to the well to get more funds, which results in dilution for the existing owners, and they're not so early on that they just haven't done anything yet. Right? So find that middle ground, Series A, Series B, Series C. That might be like your. It'll vary, but that'll give you an idea where they're at. Also see if the company is backed by a respected private equity firm or maybe a VC firm, right? Or does it expect to be pretty much imminently? As in the founders are in talks with the investors right now and just money's getting ready to come in. Those are all kind of important benchmarks to have. Ask, and don't be shy about this, ask how much money the company has in the bank, what the burn rate is, monthly burn rate, and do they have sufficient runway for 8 to 12 months? And if they have more funding coming in, that will give them additional runway, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to join a company that's basically close to running out of cash. Don't be shy about asking this question. So ask how much cash do you have in the bank, what's your burn rate, so what's your runway, and where's new money coming from, and when is it expected? Okay. That to me is a very key function of evaluating an offer from a startup. Again, to set the stage on to understand how much funding the company has, talk to independent investors of the company. Ask them why they invested. Are they happy with the investment? Are they happy with the management that is in place? And are they optimistic about the future? So people can be pretty forthcoming if you just ask. So ask them that. Does the company have a strong board of directors that is not dominated by the company management itself, right? That's a little bit more on the esoteric side of questions. It's good if the answer is yes, but it's not necessarily bad if the answer is no. They might be working on a board. The important thing is that every company, to be structurally sound and having a good shot, having good funding in the future, needs to have a good board of directors. That's not just the CEO and the COO and just managing the company. If the company is getting ready for an investment round, ask what the pre and post valuation of the company is. So if a company is valued at $5 million today and they're getting ready to bring in another $3 or $4 million, and what will it be valued after that? Because depending on when you join the company, if money is imminent and you're joining a company in the pre-round, in the pre-money or the post-money, the number of shares you get will have a direct reflection on what percentage of the company you own. If you get X shares of a company, of X options of a company in the pre-money, that's going to be more than the same X shares post-money, right? Because now the company is more diluted. So that's something to keep in mind. So once you've gone through this, you have a reasonably good idea that the company is financially stable for the next X number of months that you're comfortable with, right? So step 3. Step 3 is to evaluate the business plan and the market that the company is in. Do you remember the PPM that we talked about, or the investment documents we talked about? They will have the market that the company wants to play in, and the business plan that the company has to approach that market. Okay, so this is where you read it and really try to understand what the company does, what it's all about, who it's going to go up against. So you're trying to figure out what are the chances of the company to succeed in the market it's chosen to be in, right? Ask management, what does the company do? If management cannot articulate that in a sentence or two, like just 20-second elevator pitch, if they can't do that, that's a problem. So make sure that you are clear on just 2-3 sentences of what a company does, and whether that's something that you are interested in, right? So both of those are important. Once you've kind of done that, then you've got to see if there are competitors in that market. Both too few competitors and too many competitors are a problem, right? Too few competitors means that this is probably a very new space, like really, really new, and nobody knows about it. So a company that's starting in this space has to have a lot of money because they have to build the market as they go along. They have to create the demand for this need that they're trying to fill, and then show their customers, their prospect, that they're the best ones to fill it. That requires some really deep pockets. On the flip side, if there are too many competitors, then it's probably a commodity market, like tons of competition. So unless the company is doing something truly unique in that commodity market, again, probably not the best. So too few, not so good. Too many, not so good. The sweet spot is if there are a few big ones and a host of small ones. Because if in that market with that kind of competitor dynamic, what that tells you is that this is a healthy market space with good exit prospects in a few years, right? So if there's a few companies who are being successful in it, that means other people have also put money in and been successful in it. So there's something in this market space, and there's a bunch of small ones that are trying to be there, and you want to be one of them. That's perfectly fine. This is a good, healthy space, right? So that's what you want to look for. Some other things, some kind of like thresholds for me when looking at the business plan. If the company's plan is to be competing with any facet of Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, yeah, no, that's a red flag. You know, that those companies, that ship has sailed. If you're trying to compete, if you're trying to do e-commerce and you're going up against Amazon, guess what? Your chance for success just went way down, right? And that's what this video is about: how to maximize that chance, and avoid that cratering. So, if the company is expected to be competing with established big tech companies that are themselves growing fast and being successful, that is not something I want to be in, right? Similarly, if the company's business plan expects them to be acquired by one of the big tech firms, that's also not a good plan. A company should be able to stand on its own merits and not just expect to be bought up by somebody else. Can happen, great. That's one of the, that's a great thing, but may not happen. And the company needs to be able to stand on its own merits. Look at the number of times the company has pivoted. It happens often, right? The startup starts up, they do something, it doesn't quite succeed, they do a little pivot, maybe a change on what they're doing, and they try that, right? So nothing wrong with that, but you want to avoid pivot-happy startups. Because if you see a company and they've pivoted like 3 times in the last year, that means they're flailing. They're trying different things, nothing is working, so they just keep trying, right? You want to avoid pivot-happy companies. And again, I mentioned this before, if the company is getting ready for an investment round, what's the pre and post money valuation for the company? We talked about how this has an impact on you. So this is the business plan and the market that the company is going to be in. You need to go through it. You have to have a clear idea of, is this market ready, good, and the company is positioned well to compete effectively in it. Now, if you've gotten this far and you have 5 companies that are courting you, you're looking at them, you've already done through steps 1, 2, and 3, and you've whittled it down to 2 or 3 offers, right, that are in front of you. Now we come to the last 2 steps. So step 4 of this 5-step process is to evaluate your own worth, right? What do you bring to the table, and how much is that going to be worth? The best way I can explain this is to give you a couple of examples, right? So let's say if you are going to be the chief technology officer of an early stage tech startup, but you're not a founder, because in our case, right, if you're a founder, you'd be doing seed rounds or bootstrap rounds. So you're joining a startup that is already there. But let's say you're joining as a CTO for a startup that's beyond the Series A funding round, right? So you're not the founder. Expect an offer between 1% and 3% equity, right? More than that would be very difficult to get unless you have already been the CTO of a successful startup. And then again, if you have done that, that might give you access to more equity than the one that's coming as part of your compensation as well. So you may get X% as part of your equity with the ability to buy more if you are rock star CTO who's done this before and has been successful before. If this is your first time, if you're a VP of engineering somewhere else, or if you're a senior software developer somewhere else and you're stepping up to be the CTO or somebody right next to the CTO, then expect a lot less, like 0.5%, 1%, maybe something like that. This is for senior engineering management at a startup. Right? If you're going to be a key engineer, you can probably, and you're going to be a key, so you're going to be somebody with some relevant expertise, and you're going to be a senior developer at this place. You can expect up to 0.5%, right? Which is not chump change. It's a pretty decent amount, depending on your experience and expertise. Also, keep in mind, these examples are based on my experience, right? So they may or may not be true for other people, but this is just what I've found to be generally true in what I've seen over the last 20 years. So this has been my experience, for whatever it's worth. At least it gives you a data point to consider when figuring out what you think you're worth. So if you're going and you're a senior engineer with some good expertise that you're joining a startup where the market resonates with you, you know how to provide value to them, you can probably go in and say, you know what, I should have 0.5% of this company. So that gives you a data point to keep in mind. You can obviously you can get more equity if you accept a lower salary. That happens a lot. But for me, I would caution you against getting carried away. Like for me personally, I probably wouldn't discount my market salary by more than 25% to get more equity, right? So if you should be making $150,000, don't accept $75,000 and a bushel of options, right? Remember that still the likely outcome is the business will fail and you'll have great experience. So I don't want that to happen and have made very little money also, right? So remember what you're sacrificing. So that's what you've got to evaluate. You've got to evaluate how much salary is important to you, what percentage you're willing to give up to work at a startup, and how much equity you should ask for. So that kind of establishes the basics for you. Step 5 is to look at the actual offer from the company. See what they're willing to give, what the compensation package is that they're giving you, and be able to evaluate it successfully, right? So salary is an important component. We just talked about it. Great, that's out of the way. You're probably more interested in the equity portion of it because that's where the real money can come from if the company is successful. So if you get an offer and it says, okay, you get X salary and then you get Y equity, now you've got to really understand what that Y equity translates to, right? So the main thing you want to take away when you're looking at an offer from a company is what percentage of the business you are going to own, right? Your shares, your options, your stocks, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What percentage of the company that entitles you to, and what value that percentage is expected to translate into when an exit event takes place, right? And that's going to be a little bit of an estimate, but the company should have their current valuation and where they expect to be valued at, and what percentage will you own, and how much will that translate to. You should get a range. Right? That's what you're trying to suss out between the lines. So let's talk about the two main forms in which equity can be offered to you. Right? So one is you can be offered shares or stocks in the company, which is direct ownership in the company. Even though this sounds the best, it's really not the best, and I'll tell you why. Because this is actually compensation that is considered compensation that you're receiving. So if you get $100,000 salary and you get $50,000 worth of stock, then you just made $150,000 in compensation. Even though you got $100,000 in money and $50K in stocks that really you can't do anything with right now, right? But the government still considers that to be $150,000 worth of compensation, and you will be taxed accordingly. So you can find yourself in the odd spot where you don't have enough money, or you really can't afford to pay the taxes on the equity you just got because the tax burden is too high, right? So we come to the main way that people are generally given equity, in which is stock options, right? So stock options are far more common, and an option doesn't give you stock directly. It gives you the opportunity to buy that stock in the future at the current stock price, right? So you have the option to buy a stock, and the stock today may have a value of $1, right? but you're not paying $1 to get it. You're just saying, hey, you know what? You have the option to buy the stock for its current price of $1. That'll be the strike price 4 years in the future, when the stock price might be $5, right? So fast forward, let's say 4 years, and the stock price is now $5, but your option has $1 strike price. So you pay $1, you get 5, you made a $4 profit on your option. That's how stock options work. And I can make a more detailed video about that if that is of interest, let me know. But in any event, you will probably be granted stock options. So the way in which they're granted also varies from company to company. Generally, stock options have a vesting schedule. So a company will say, we are granting you 40,000 stock options with $1 strike price, right? So that okay, great. And you're doing the calculations in the back of your mind, what percentage of the company that represents, and how much value that could be to you in 2 or 3 years, right? So that's the side computation you're doing. But you get these options, but you don't get these options right away. You get the vest over a period of time. So you might get, off your 40,000 options, you might get 25% vests after you do on your first anniversary, another 25% vests on your second anniversary, and so on and so forth till they're 100% vested. Generally, there's also a change of control clause also. So let's say you start with the company and they're vested, you've been there 2 years, and you've vested 50% of your options, and the other 50% are unvested, and the company gets sold. Generally, that is a change of control event, and all your options should vest immediately, right? So you want to make sure that the offer that you have in front, when they have stock options and the schedule listed in it, that they mention what change of control does to those options. There are other ways to get equity as well, such as stock appreciation rights, but really those are kind of beyond the scope of this video, and 90% of the time you'll be dealing with stock options. Again, what it comes down to is ask what the options that you give it. Ask the company how many outstanding fully diluted stocks there are, how many options, how many stocks are outstanding, and what the current value of the company is, and what the current strike price of the stock is, and then what percentage, translate that into the percentage of equity that you own of the company. And then you can figure out how much it'll be worth in the future if the company thing grows tenfold in value. Then what amount of money will that translate to for you? One last note here. If the company expects to keep raising money in the future, so you've done your Series A, but maybe there's another Series B, Series C to come along, expect to be diluted, right? So if you own 0.5% of the company, it's entirely possible the next round of funding will take you down to 0.4%, right? That's okay. That's just life in the big city. That's what happens if the company is still needing to raise money. There is dilution expected. If you're worried about it, then make sure you get more equity pre-money. That's what we talked about, the pre and post-money stuff. And really, that's what I have. Those are the 5 steps. So, we looked at, what did we look at? We looked at evaluating the management, evaluating the funding and financial security of the company. We looked at evaluating the business plan, the market space that the company plays in. We evaluated, step 4 was evaluating your own worth and what you bring to the company. And the last step was evaluating the actual offer and determining how much money you can make out of this position. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please consider posting a comment and asking me, and I'll be happy to attempt to answer your questions. If you did find it helpful, I would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing or giving me a thumbs up. This was my first video, so be gentle. A little bit about me, if you've made it this far. I have a fair bit of expertise in starting software companies from scratch and taking them all the way to a successful exit. I've done it a couple of times. My role is generally that of a founding CTO. And in this capacity, I have raised money, done a lot of the early engineering and software development, all the way through. I've been on the board of directors for the companies that I've been involved with. On a technology side, I'm quite knowledgeable on the GPS and cellular space. And then I'm a nerd, right? A full-on technology nerd. So cars and EV enthusiast. And just to round out my nerd credentials, I love science fiction and fantasy books as well. And because of course I do. Quick shout out to Aileron Kong and Lit RPG, a fantasy subgenre that I'm enjoying at the moment. If you think I should make a video on any of the above topics or any other topic, let me know. I would love to oblige. Thank you for watching.